We studied it for 18 months, and we published and said, to the best of our ability, we think this is what it says or something similar to this. We were confident that we had the name Yahweh and that the word Arur was there. But if you're reading it the way that we think it reads, then this is what we suggest. Cursed, cursed, cursed. Cursed are you by the God Yahu, Yod-Heh-Vav. Cursed you will surely die. Cursed by Yahu. Cursed, cursed, cursed.
I'm Timothy Mahoney, an investigative filmmaker. I was raised to believe the events of the Bible really happened, but as I grew older, I was challenged to lose those beliefs. Join me on this journey as we investigate the Bible, and I will show you an amazing pattern of evidence that will inspire your faith. Welcome back, thinkers. We are again talking with Dr. Scott Stripling and Steve Law. We're talking about the Mount Ebal Curse Tablet. We're just getting to the good stuff now when it comes to, how did you decipher what this tablet said to know that it was a curse tablet? So, Scott, what was the next step once you realized that you believe this was a curse tablet?
With the help of Zvi Koenigsberg, a friend from Israel, who curried that because of COVID, I couldn't go to Prague myself, but we had found a lab in Prague that had a track record of being able to penetrate through lead using tomographic scanning. So Zvi became the courier. They then penetrated this lead with a series of slices, which is something I didn't even know at the time you could do. And we began to get results back. And when I saw the first results, their epigrapher on site in Prague is Daniela Urbanova. And Daniela's expertise is in the classical period, but she's a paleographer, and she had more experience than anyone in the world in seeing tomographic scans and recognizing. It takes some acclimation of the eyes to be able to see, it's sort of like a radiologist can read an X-ray expertly, and the rest of us sort of have to squint. So Daniela saw 4 letters, and she said, I'm sure these are man-made. These are not just, random scratches or cracks. They're man-made. She said, I think it's probably this or that, but, she doesn't know the early script. Her expertise was in the later script. Based on that, then I formed a collaborative team and brought in 2 epigraphers. After she had already identified these first letters, we brought in Peter van der Veen and Gershon Galil, and then we had Daniel Vavrik, who was the main scientist in Prague, who was helping us with the data processing into the tomography. So it's really kind of interesting. It was a high-tech wet sifting that enabled us to find the tablet. Then it was this high-tech tomography that enabled us to be able to read the text. And yeah, Peter and Gershon, as soon as they got the scans, I could see there were man-made markings, and I could make out some of the alephs and so forth, but they immediately began to put this thing together.
Yes, and an aleph is, would that be a letter, right? A form of a letter?
Yeah, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet. One of the things that, of course, I was thinking about, it's the mountain of the curse. So this seems too good to be true that we have a cursed tablet. What if we had the word Arur, Aleph, Resh, Resh. What if we had this? Wouldn't that be incredible? The word curse on a cursed tablet, and lo and behold, that's the first thing we saw was this Aleph, and then it was followed by the Resh, and wow! At that point, I was really blown away.
So what happened next then? What was the word, or what was the sentence that came out of this tablet?
Well, let me just give some qualifications, because writing in this time period is meandering. And I know that's hard for a modern mind to grasp, but all the script in this Proto-Sinaitic, Proto-Canaanic script is wandering. It's what we call boustrophodon, is the ox plows. It can go from top to bottom, bottom to top. It moves around. So it's nothing like we would think of. For this reason, it is very subject to interpretation, because if you read it this way, it could say this. If you read it another way, it could say that. We studied it for 18 months, and we published and said, to the best of our ability, we think this is what it says or something similar to this. We were confident that we had the name Yahweh and that the word Arur was there. But if you're reading it the way that we think it reads, then this is what we suggest. Cursed, cursed, cursed. Cursed are you by the God Yahu, Yod-Heh-Vav. Cursed you will surely die. Cursed by Yahu. Cursed, cursed, cursed. And that's what we suggested as a reading. But from the initial press conference to my statements in between, and even in the Heritage Science article, I said many times, I'm not dogmatic about this. I'm dogmatic that it has the name Yahweh in it and that the word curse is in it. But this is a suggested reading, and I expect there to be many others. Like the Kribbit Kayafa Ostracon has had 15 alternate readings that have been published by scholars. So I expected that, and I think that's what we're going to get.
Well, what happens too, for people that aren't familiar, but if they want to get some background on this, the Moses Controversy film is a really good film to kind of give you a background about the alphabet, because what happens is that the early form of the alphabet, as we shared in that film, shows up in Egypt, actually in an area. Donald Redford, one of our interviews, basically said he felt was Avaris, and Avaris was an area where we found we're suggesting that the early Israelites lived, and this might be where Joseph was from. And what you find is that there are no vowels, right? In the very beginning, there's no vowels, and there's no separation. So, I mean, it's almost like notes of a sentence, but it was phonetic. Ka and ah and g, and those types of things were showing up, so that you were able to take the bull's head, and eventually it becomes our letter A, as it were. And so what's interesting about that is that, as we will show in that film, is you can read right to left or left to right or up or down, So that's in the very beginning stages, people didn't know. But what you're finding and what your suggested reading is that there's a connection. If you use this idea to read in a particular direction, then this is what you can pull out of this inscription.
I think so, and some of the letters are more clear than others, and some, we had to put in brackets and say we think that this letter is there. But I have no doubt that, as I said, the covenant name of God is there, that the word curse is there, and it's some sort of a self-imprecatory curse, I think, that the Israelites were bringing upon themselves. For your Bible readers, they may find it interesting to look back at Job 19:24 and 25. Oh, that my words were written on a lead tablet with an iron pen. If Job is the oldest book in the Bible, which many of us believe that it is, there's that very ancient way of thinking that when we write these things on lead and seal it, it becomes binding, okay? Has force in the spirit world. These three epigraphers all told me they were seeing letters. And two of the three, that they were Proto-Sinaitic letters, and that we had a suggested reading for this. So I didn't want to stick my neck out, because I knew that there would be a lot of people ready to chop it off when we suggested a connection with a biblical text and a biblical site. But the process went through peer review in a very highly rated peer-reviewed journal, and passed. There were three peer reviewers. So my three epigraphers, plus the three peer reviewers, plus lots of other people behind the scene who had proofed this in advance. I thought when we went public, I expected that there would be an outcry, but it even exceeded my expectations.
Of course. There's something potentially connecting to the Bible. Steve, in some of our questions we looked at before, is that why is this inscription so important, right? Steve, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Right. I think we've mentioned a little bit already that it's for one, if it is from the era of Joshua, which maybe isn't 100% established, but even anything close to that, it would be the oldest Hebrew writing potentially that's ever been found in Canaan, in Israel. Two, it would suggest that there was writing available and literacy at the time that Moses was writing the Torah and at the time Joshua would write his book. So those are major issues. If that's correct, then that does away with what's been a pillar of academia and their attitudes toward the Bible. And third, if its potential could be even a tablet that connects with if this is an altar that Joshua built, it would just be firsthand archaeological evidence that this site was associated with curses on the mountain of curse, Mount Ebal. So it could be direct archaeological evidence. It's evidence to literacy and writing. It's evidence that Moses really could have written the Torah as the Bible claims he did. The stakes are high, as Scott suggested. Yes.
Well, one thing too, Scott, is that Dr. Randall Price and I went to Shechem, and we went to the area where there was a temple there. And there is a history of these standing pillars that were there. Also, that Joshua's, raised a pillar there.
Ernst Zellen, the German scholar who suggested it had some connection to a cultic site and was part of religious. He even might have suggested a connection to the Israelites, but yeah, his co-leader was not happy with that.
Yeah, when he left the site, they took this large pillar. He threw it into a dump and broke it. And years later, there's another archaeologist. We have his book.
G. Ernest Wright.
Right, G. Ernest Wright. Yeah, I've got his book here in the library. And G. Ernest Wright uncovered that and set it up, and we have half of that column there. But there is quite a story about that temple and that location and the connection to Joshua.
Probably the temple of Baal-berith, mentioned in the book of Judges, Baal-berith.
Exactly. So this is a hot zone for the biblical story and the narrative, and you're uncovering information about that. If we move into what is your theory behind who wrote this text? Do you have a theory about that?
Well, I cannot prove it, but yes, opinions and theories I certainly have. Could have been Joshua ben Nun. The Lord told him to write on Mount Ebal, which indicates he was literate. He probably had a scribe also, and so it seems more likely to me that he probably told the scribe what to write. And you have to remember, it's a very small surface. Think of a business card folded in half. They're writing on this with a stylus, and I am in the process now of publishing the whole project, everything that we found, not just the tablet. And among the things that will be published are a couple of styluses that we recovered. So not only do we have writing, but we have writing implements as well. So it's written with this fine-pointed stylus. And of course, it's a small space. And so the letters, think of the newer Lachish Lyscombe that's just been published this last year. Same thing. The letters overlap, and it's a small space. This was never intended to be read. It was written so that it would have power. It would be binding. The word is binding. And so once it's now sealed, it's gone into force. It's laid on the altar, and now it's going to be covered with blood when you have the sacrifices. And so the picture is the blood covers the curse. So the man who will come to the altar and acknowledge his sin will not be held accountable for these curses. The blood will cover it. But the one who will not come to the altar will have these curses inure to him.
You think about the theological dynamic of all of this. The fact that throughout history, it's the shedding of blood that covers sin. And I think one of the things that, Steve and I on this next movie is that we realize that context, most people don't have a context of the story of God's creation, the fall, and then these attempts to have a relationship with man. And we're God is constantly making these covenant agreements and saying, I'm going to eventually, he chooses this person, Abraham, after the Tower of Babel. And we're going to be, talking more about that coming up in our next film. And we're going to be explaining this storyline. And in fact, Peter Gentry, who says that the reason why we understand story and why people is because God created us to understand story. And there is a story of God wanting to have a relationship with mankind. And interesting, the prophet Ezekiel and others, but they talk about this, it's really a marriage relationship. And we know that right now Israel is in the news, and we're looking at these prophets who were telling us about this tension between God and his people and this relationship that he had. And these curses, would be like, hey, listen, I'm going to marry you as a people. That's what the Bible is basically, and Ezekiel is telling us. Steve, could you explain a little bit about that for people that might not understand this marriage relationship? But Peter Gentry and I said, or he talked with us, he says, Tim, you need to let people know that this isn't just an agreement between somebody. God is marrying a people.
Right. And I think Peter made the point that even in Hollywood movies, when there's a couple that breaks up, there's hurt there, there's anger there. And we see that in the Bible. God describes it as a marriage, so we can understand that there's pain and there's hurt when the covenant is broken. When the people are unfaithful, it's like an unfaithful spouse. And we can appreciate that when we think of it in those terms, and that's why he uses this imagery of a bride who's adorned with beautiful things. God adorns her with these beautiful things, and then she is unfaithful. And that's the breaking of the covenant that causes consequences, that causes pain, that causes, anguish because of that broken relationship. And it's much more than like a business contract or what we might think of some modern covenants. There's a relationship involved there that's very deep and very binding. And to rip that apart is painful.
So, we think about the word testament, and it's a testimony. I think that that part of the testimony that I would look at would be, well, so you take the curse tablet and you go, well, is this part of the testimony? And what Steve and I are looking at, because you were at the Temple Mount Sifting Project, is that in the next film, what we're seeing is that when these covenants were made, that there was a promise that they would become a kingdom, a nation, that this marriage relationship would have consequences. And I think that's basically what we're saying, and we're looking at those consequences. So it says that if you break this covenant, you'll have a kingdom, but you'll be destroyed if you break this covenant, because you're in a dangerous place. If you're God's people that He's chosen, and then you don't want to serve Him, you're in a dangerous position because you're not under His protection like you were at one time. He says you'll be destroyed as a nation, you'll be scattered among the nations. You'll be persecuted, but in the future you'll return. So we've got kingdom, destroyed, scattered, persecution, and then return. That's what we're looking at in the future. The next film that we're working on, and it's based around, in some ways, this Mount Ebal Curse Tablet is saying, hey, if you break this covenant, there's consequences.
That's right. The New Testament tells us, Galatians chapter 6. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. What a man sows, he reaps. So the idea that there's cause and effect, or there's consequences, that's probably the greatest lesson we could ever teach our children or our grandchildren, is that our actions have consequences. And that is the idea of covenant. A contract is between equals. You can renegotiate a contract. A covenant is between unequal parties, and it's binding in eternity.
When we come back for our last podcast on this, we're going to be talking about why some people jump so quickly to attack the tablet, and some of the credibility that we have with a peer-reviewed, document. In other words, you didn't just post on YouTube, hey, I found this. This went through a lot of criteria before you published it. I'm not sure what you call it, but it was exhaustive research where you built a case. So we're going to come back. We're going to close our episode talking about the debate that is raging and what we've learned from it, what Scott's going to be doing next. And I also want to let people know that Scott has written 2 books. You've written a number of things, but tell us the name of the 2 books.
Okay, you have The Trowel and the Truth, and I think folks can actually buy that through Patterns. The Power of Covenant in Times of Crisis. The 5 Views on the Exodus, which I'm a co-author of. And as you said, a number of other books that are probably very technical, like final publications on archaeological sites that would probably bore people to death.
Yeah. Well, we'll let you know about those books. And if you're interested in this, you can continue to dive into it with Scott. So we'll be back next time for our final episode. So thanks again, and keep on thinking.
If you have enjoyed this program, you can help create more films preserving the historical credibility of the Bible with your tax-deductible gift of $30 or more to the Patterns of Evidence Foundation. With your donation, you will receive a Patterns of Evidence film of your choice. Build your personal inspirational library and help us make more Bible-affirming films that you can share with your family and friends.
If this episode leaves you in deep thought, join the club. Become a thinker, a free membership program giving people like you a closer look at the archaeological findings leading to patterns of evidence for biblical events.